history for sleep. The Forgotten Dynasty of Silent Emperors, a mystery from ancient China's lost past story. Overview: what happened to the dynasty that ruled for 300 years but left no written records? When did an entire civilization choose silence over speech? Where in the remote mountains of ancient China did emperors communicate only through dreams? Who were the silent emperors, and why did they believe words would end the world? How did archaeologists discover pottery that changes color based on the listener's brainwaves? Welcome to tonight's journey, welcome to tonight's story, a tale designed for those seeking rest and gentle dreams. You don't need to remember anything from this journey through ancient China's most boring and mysterious dynasty. Find your most comfortable position, dim the lights, and let your mind drift as we explore forgotten history together. This audio will gradually fade to whisper quiet after 50 minutes, allowing you to slip naturally into sleep. Tonight we venture into the Kilian Mountains of Western China, where archaeologists in 1987 discovered something that shouldn't exist according to historical records. Deep within caves that had been sealed for over 2,000 years, they found the remnants of the Chenmo dynasty, the silent emperors who ruled vast territories without ever speaking aloud. The discovery began mundanely enough. Dr. Chen Wei, a geologist studying mineral deposits, noticed unusual pottery fragments near a collapsed cave entrance. The pottery was unremarkable at first glance, simple grey ceramics with no decorative patterns. But when Dr. Chen held the fragments while feeling drowsy from his long hike, something extraordinary happened. The pottery began to change color, shifting from grey to deep blue, then to soft green. Local villagers in the nearby settlement of Shikao had stories about the dreaming caves, passed down through generations. They spoke of ancient rulers who lived in absolute silence, believing that spoken words would tear holes in the fabric of reality itself. These emperors, they claimed, governed their people through shared dreams, communicating complex laws and edicts while their subjects slept. The villagers described how their ancestors would gather each evening in large communal sleeping halls, lying on simple straw mats, while court officials burned special incense made from mountain herbs. As the smoke filled the rooms, entire populations would drift into synchronized dreams where the silent emperor would appear. His messages conveyed through imagery and emotion rather than speech. Professor Liu Xiaoming from Beijing University's archaeology department initially dismissed these stories as folklore. But when carbon dating of the pottery fragments revealed them to be from the Han Dynasty period, yet showed no connection to any known Chinese civilization from that era, he became intrigued. The pottery contained mineral compositions unlike anything found in known Han Dynasty artifacts, suggesting an entirely separate cultural development. What made the discovery even more puzzling was the complete absence of any written language. Every known Chinese dynasty had developed sophisticated writing systems, yet the silent dynasty caves contained no characters, no inscriptions, no records of any kind. Instead, the walls were covered with smooth, polished surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Dr. Chen Wei returned to the caves with a full archaeological team in 1988. They spent months carefully excavating the sealed chambers, finding room after room filled with the color-changing pottery, along with bronze mirrors that showed no reflection, and stone tablets that were completely blank yet felt warm to the touch. The team began experiencing unusual dreams during their stay near the caves. Night after night, archaeologists reported identical dreams of a tall, thin man in simple robes who would gesture toward images of mountains, rivers, and stars. The man never spoke, but somehow conveyed complex ideas about governance, agriculture, and astronomy through these silent communications. Dr. Sarah Williams, a visiting researcher from Oxford University, kept detailed records of these dreams. She noted that the dream emperor always appeared at the same time each night, roughly 3 hours after the team members fell asleep. His appearance never varied, nor did the setting. A simple room with white walls and a single window showing the same mountain landscape. Local historians researched ancient records, searching for any mention of silent rulers or dream-based governance. They found scattered references in Tang dynasty documents to the Quiet Kingdom to the west and rulers who speak through sleep. But these mentions were brief and provided no historical context. The mystery deepened when team members realized that their shared dreams contained information none of them possessed while awake. The Dream Emperor showed them agricultural techniques that were later verified as historically accurate methods, used in ancient China, yet these techniques were not documented in any texts the archaeologists had studied. As winter approached and the team prepared to leave the site, they made one final discovery that would change everything. Hidden behind a collapsed wall in the deepest chamber, they found a room filled with hundreds of small clay tablets, each one perfectly smooth and unmarked. But when Dr. Chen Wei held one while falling asleep that night, he experienced the most vivid dream of his life. The dream showed him the founding of the Silent Dynasty, a story that began 3,000 years ago when a young prince named Huayan made a discovery that would silence his people forever. The prince who heard too much Prince Huayan lived during the final years of the Western Zhou dynasty, a time when words held power and spoken commands could reshape reality. Born into the royal family of a small mountain kingdom, Huayan possessed an unusual gift that would prove to be both blessing and curse. He could hear not just the words people spoke aloud, but also the words they thought, whispered to themselves, or dreamed. This ability manifested when Huayan turned 16. During a court ceremony, he suddenly began responding to questions that officials had only thought about asking. He would answer concerns that ministers had not yet voiced, address problems they had considered but not mentioned. Initially, the court marveled at their prince's wisdom and intuition, but Huayan's gift grew stronger and more burdensome with each passing day. He began hearing the internal voices of everyone within several miles of the palace. Servants' worries about their families, guards' complaints about their duties, nobles' schemes and jealousies. All of it flooded into his consciousness as a constant, overwhelming din of human thought and speech. The young prince tried various methods to block out the mental noise. He moved to isolated chambers high in the palace towers, but still heard the thoughts of people in the valley below. He traveled to remote monasteries, but even the monks' meditation practices created a hum of internal dialogue that Huayan could not escape. During this period of suffering, Huayan made a disturbing discovery. He realized that human speech and thought were not merely sounds and ideas, but actual forces that shaped the physical world. Every word spoken created tiny tears in what he perceived as a visible fabric surrounding reality. These tears were normally so small and healed so quickly that they caused no harm. But Huayan noticed that in places where many people gathered and spoke frequently, the tears accumulated faster than they could heal. Markets, temples, and court halls showed signs of what he called word damage, invisible wounds in reality that grew larger over time. He observed that in ancient sites where countless generations had spoken, the very air seemed thinner, less substantial. The prince became convinced that if human speech continued unchecked, these accumulating tears would eventually cause reality itself to collapse. He envisioned a future where the constant chatter of growing populations would literally tear apart the world, leaving nothing but empty void where earth and sky once existed. Driven by this terrifying vision, Prince Huayan began developing what he called the Silent Way, a method of governance and communication that relied entirely on dreams and mental imagery rather than spoken or written words. He spent years learning to project his thoughts directly into the sleeping minds of others, bypassing the destructive power of speech entirely. His first experiments were conducted with volunteers from his personal guard. These loyal soldiers agreed to participate in nightly dream sessions where Huayan would communicate orders and information through visual symbols and emotional impressions. The results were remarkable. The guards could understand complex military strategies, execute coordinated maneuvers, and even grasp abstract philosophical concepts, all without a single word being spoken. Word of these experiments spread throughout the kingdom, though the irony of word spreading was not lost on Huayan. Curious nobles and common citizens requested to participate in the dream communications. Soon, entire sections of the palace operated in complete silence during daylight hours, with all important business conducted through the shared dreams of the previous night. The Silent Way proved surprisingly effective for governance. Crime rates dropped dramatically as potential wrongdoers found it impossible to hide their intentions from a ruler who could see their plans in their dreams. Disputes were resolved quickly and fairly, as all parties could share their perspectives directly. Through dream imagery without the distortions and misunderstandings that plagued spoken language, agricultural productivity increased as farmers received detailed growing instructions through their sleep, learning optimal planting times, crop rotation techniques, and weather prediction methods that had been passed down through the dreams of experienced cultivators. Artisans developed new techniques by sharing their skills through dream-based teaching, creating pottery, metalwork, and textiles of unprecedented quality. But the most significant change was in the kingdom's relationship with nature itself, as speech diminished and eventually disappeared entirely from daily life. Huayan observed that the word damage to reality began to heal. The air felt more substantial, colors appeared more vivid, and the natural world seemed to respond more directly to human thoughts and intentions. Animals, previously frightened away by human voices, returned to live peacefully alongside the silent. People, plants grew more abundantly in gardens tended by dreamers who could communicate directly with the life force of growing things. Even the weather patterns seemed to stabilize, as if the constant interruption of human speech had previously been disrupting natural atmospheric processes. When Prince Huayan's father died, the succession to the throne occurred without ceremony or announcement. The kingdom simply dreamed together of their new emperor, and when they woke, everyone understood that the transition of power had occurred. There were no speeches, no formal coronations, no written proclamations. The silent dynasty had begun. Under Emperor Huayan's rule, the kingdom expanded not through conquest, but through attraction. Neighboring territories, plagued by the chaos and conflict that seemed to accompany spoken language, voluntarily joined the silent dynasty after experiencing the peace and prosperity of dream-based governance. Emperor Huayan's greatest challenge was creating physical spaces that could facilitate mass dream communication. Traditional palace architecture, designed for spoken ceremonies and written proclamations, proved entirely inadequate for a civilization that communicated through sleep. The emperor needed buildings that could enhance and focus the dream state, allowing thousands of people to share synchronized visions. The solution came from an unexpected source. Li Mengzhu, the kingdom's master architect, had suffered from chronic insomnia for most of his adult life. Unlike other citizens who adapted easily to dream communication, Li found himself excluded from the silent dynasty's new form of governance simply because he could not fall asleep during the scheduled dream sessions. Desperate to participate in his transformed society, Li began experimenting with environmental factors that might induce sleep. He tested different room temperatures, air circulation patterns, floor materials, wall textures, and ceiling heights. His workshop became a laboratory for sleep architecture, filled with prototype chambers designed to create optimal conditions for shared dreaming. Li's breakthrough came when he discovered that certain geometric shapes, when incorporated into room design, seemed to naturally guide the human mind toward specific types of dreams. Circular chambers promoted dreams of unity and collective decision-making. Octagonal rooms enhanced dreams related to agriculture and natural cycles. Square spaces focused the mind on practical matters like construction and mathematics. More importantly, Li found that connecting these differently shaped chambers through specific corridor patterns created a kind of dream network, where people sleeping in one room could easily share visions with those in adjacent spaces. The architecture itself became a physical manifestation of the silent dynasty's mental communication system. The first major construction project under this new architectural philosophy was the Palace of Quiet Governance. Unlike traditional Chinese palaces with their emphasis on vertical grandeur and ornate decoration, the Palace of Quiet Governance was built largely underground, with rooms carved directly into the mountain bedrock. The palace consisted of interconnected chambers, each designed for specific governmental functions. The Chamber of Laws was a perfect circle with a domed ceiling, where citizens would dream of justice and legal principles. The Chamber of Resources was octagonal, facilitating dreams about agriculture, mining, and trade. The Chamber of Defense was square and angular, creating dreams focused on protection and military strategy. At the center of the palace was the Emperor's Dream Chamber, a unique space that connected to all other rooms through carefully calculated tunnel systems. The chamber's walls were covered with the same light-absorbing material found in the original caves, creating an environment of absolute darkness that enhanced the dream state. The chamber's floor was inlaid with patterns of different stones, each type of mineral chosen for its supposed ability to influence dream content. Jade promoted dreams of wisdom and long-term thinking. Iron encouraged dreams of strength and determination. Silver facilitated dreams of communication and connection. With others, construction of the palace required thousands of workers, but the building process itself was conducted in complete silence. Workers received their instructions through nightly dreams, learning complex architectural techniques, stone-cutting methods, and engineering principles without spoken or written guidance. This dream-based construction method produced remarkable results. The palace's chambers were perfectly proportioned for acoustic resonance, despite the fact that they were designed for silence. The underground rooms maintained ideal temperature and humidity levels year-round, even though no traditional ventilation systems were installed. The structural engineering was so precise that the palace has remained stable for over 2,000 years as news of the Palace of Quiet Governance spread to neighboring regions. Architects from other kingdoms attempted to replicate its design. However, these copies failed to achieve the dream enhancement effects of the original. Li Mengu realized that the palace worked not just because of its physical design, but because it had been built by people who truly understood and practiced dream communication. The success of the palace led to a kingdom-wide building program. Every village constructed its own dream hall, a smaller version of the palace chambers, where local communities could gather for nightly governance sessions. These halls were connected to the central palace through what Li called dream roads, underground tunnels that somehow facilitated communication between distant sleeping populations. The dream roads remain one of the most mysterious aspects of silent dynasty architecture. Modern archaeologists have mapped extensive tunnel networks throughout the Kilian Mountains, but cannot determine how these tunnels were excavated with such precision using ancient tools. The tunnels are perfectly straight, maintain consistent dimensions over great distances, and intersect at mathematically precise angles. Even more puzzling is the tunnel's acoustic properties. Despite being designed for a silent civilization, the dream roads demonstrate sophisticated understanding of sound transmission. Whispers spoken at one end of a tunnel can be heard clearly at the other end, even across distances of several miles. Yet normal conversation at intermediate points along the tunnel cannot be heard at either end. Dr. Sarah Williams, during her archaeological investigation, discovered that the dream roads also exhibit unusual electromagnetic properties. Compass needles spin randomly when brought into the tunnels, and electronic devices experience significant interference. Most remarkably, people who sleep in chambers connected to the dream roads report unusually vivid dreams, even in modern times. Li Mengu's architectural innovations extended beyond governmental buildings. He designed residential complexes where families could share dreams across generations, allowing grandparents to pass down knowledge and wisdom through sleep-based teaching. Market buildings were created with chambers where merchants could dream of fair prices and quality goods, eliminating the deception and conflict common in traditional trade. The Silent Dynasty's most ambitious architectural project was the Great Library of Dreams, a massive underground complex designed to store knowledge in the form of crystallized dream experiences. Instead of books or scrolls, the library contained thousands of specially prepared stones that could induce specific educational dreams in anyone who slept while holding them. Each stone in the library was created through a complex process involving multiple dreamers. A master of a particular subject would first dream intensely about their knowledge while holding a specially prepared piece of jade. Other skilled dreamers would then enhance and refine these knowledge dreams, adding clarity and detail. Finally, the dreams would be somehow fixed into the stone through a process that remains completely mystery. The jade tablets of memory, the Great Library of Dreams, represented the Silent Dynasty's most sophisticated achievement in knowledge preservation. Unlike traditional libraries filled with written texts, this underground complex stored information in crystallized dream experiences, allowing knowledge to be transmitted directly from mind to mind across centuries. The library's creation began during the reign of Emperor Huayan's successor, Emperor Jimmy, whose name translates roughly as silent memory. Jimmy recognized that the Silent Dynasty's dream-based communication system, while highly effective for governance and daily life, posed a significant problem for preserving knowledge across generations. Traditional civilizations recorded their histories, laws, scientific discoveries, and cultural practices in written form. But the Silent Dynasty had deliberately abandoned written language as part of their rejection of word-based communication. This created a risk that important knowledge might be lost if the dreamers who possessed it died before passing it on to successors. Emperor Jimmy consulted with the kingdom's most skilled dream practitioners, seeking a method to preserve knowledge in permanent form without resorting to written language. The solution came from Master Chen Shiz, an elderly scholar who had lived through the transition from the spoken Zhou dynasty to the silent dynasty. Master Chen had observed that certain types of jade and other precious stones seemed to retain traces of human thoughts and emotions when held during intense mental states. He theorized that dreams, being particularly vivid mental experiences, might be able to permanently imprint themselves onto specially prepared stones through some unknown process. The first experiments were conducted using small pieces of white jade from the Kunlun Mountains. Master Chen would hold a jade piece while dreaming intensely about a specific memory or piece of knowledge. The process required extraordinary mental discipline, as the dreamer had to maintain conscious control over their dream content while remaining asleep. Initial results were disappointing. The jade stones showed no visible changes, and when other people held them while sleeping, they reported only ordinary dreams unrelated to Master Chun's intended content. But after months of experimentation, Master Chun discovered that the process required multiple participants working in sequence. The breakthrough came when Master Chen realized that knowledge preservation required not just one intense dream, but a carefully orchestrated series of dreams by multiple practitioners. The first dreamer would imprint their raw knowledge onto the jade. The second dreamer would clarify and organize this information. The third would add emotional context and meaning. Additional dreamers could enhance specific aspects of the knowledge or correct errors and omissions. This collaborative dreaming process produced jade tablets that could reliably induce specific knowledge dreams in anyone who held them while sleeping. The dreams were remarkably detailed and accurate, containing not just factual information, but also the emotional understanding and practical wisdom of the original dreamers. The creation of each jade tablet was a laborious process requiring weeks or months of work by teams of skilled dreamers. The most complex tablets, containing comprehensive knowledge about subjects like medicine, agriculture, or engineering, might require the participation of dozens of dreamers working in carefully coordinated sequences. Emperor Jimmy ordered the construction of the Great Library to house these jade tablets. The library was carved deep into the mountain bedrock, with chambers designed specifically to enhance the dream reading process. Each room was perfectly circular with a slightly domed ceiling, creating optimal acoustics for the subtle vibrations that seemed to accompany dream experiences. The library's chambers were arranged in a complex pattern that reflected the organization of knowledge itself. Medical tablets were stored in chambers connected by tunnels to rooms containing tablets about anatomy, herbal remedies, and surgical techniques. Agricultural tablets were housed near rooms containing knowledge about weather patterns, soil composition, and plant breeding. This physical organization allowed library users to easily access related information by moving between connected chambers while maintaining their dream state. Skilled practitioners could dream their way through entire curricula of knowledge, moving from basic concepts to advanced understanding through a single night's sleep. The library attracted scholars from across the Silent Dynasty and even from neighboring kingdoms. Visitors described the experience of accessing the jade tablets as unlike any form of learning they had previously encountered. The knowledge came not as abstract information, but as lived experience, complete with sensory details, emotional understanding, and practical wisdom. A merchant learning about foreign trade through the jade tablets, would not simply memorize facts about distant markets and exchange rates. Instead, he would experience dreams of actually traveling to these markets, negotiating with foreign traders, evaluating goods, and understanding the cultural contexts that influenced commercial relationships. A physician studying disease treatment would dream of examining patients, recognizing symptoms, preparing remedies, and performing procedures. The dream experiences included not just the technical knowledge, but also the emotional skills needed to comfort patients and work with families. During times of illness, master artisans used the library to preserve and transmit complex craft knowledge that would have been nearly impossible to document in written form. A master potter could create jade tablets containing the subtle hand movements, timing, and intuitive understanding needed to create perfect ceramics. Students could learn these skills through dream experience, waking with muscle memory and understanding that normally took years of apprenticeship to develop. The library's most mysterious section contained tablets that seemed to hold knowledge beyond human understanding. These tablets, known as the foreign memories, contained dreams that depicted unfamiliar landscapes, strange technologies, and beings that did not appear to be human. Some scholars theorized that these tablets contained knowledge from distant, future times, somehow accessed through dream experiences that transcended normal temporal boundaries. Others believed they contained memories from previous civilizations that had existed before recorded history. A few suggested they might represent knowledge from other worlds entirely. Modern archaeologists have recovered several jade tablets from the library ruins, but attempts to understand their function have been largely unsuccessful. Scientific analysis reveals that the jade contains unusual mineral inclusions not found in natural jade formations. The inclusions form microscopic patterns that appear almost like neural networks, suggesting some form of information storage. At a molecular level, when contemporary test subjects have held the ancient jade tablets while sleeping, most report unusually vivid dreams, but the content appears to be random rather than coherent knowledge transmission. This suggests that either the tablet creation process has been lost, or that accessing the stored knowledge requires specific training that modern people lack. The whispering sickness, the silent dynasty's dream-based civilization faced its greatest threat during the reign of Emperor Angxin, whose name meant peaceful heart. The crisis began subtly, with isolated reports of citizens experiencing disturbed sleep and chaotic dreams that interfered with the kingdom's communication systems. The first documented case occurred in the mountain village of Qingshan, where an elderly farmer named Wei Laoshu began talking in his sleep. This might have seemed unremarkable in any other civilization, but in the silent dynasty, vocalization during sleep was considered a serious medical condition that required immediate treatment. Wei Laoshu's sleep talking was initially dismissed as a minor ailment brought on by advanced age. Village healers attempted traditional remedies, including special herbal teas and meditation exercises designed to calm the mind during sleep. But instead of improving, Wei's condition worsened dramatically. The elderly farmer began speaking continuously during his sleep, producing streams of words in languages that no one in the village could identify. The words seemed to come from multiple sources, as if different voices were speaking through Wei's mouth in overlapping conversations. Most disturbing of all, the sleep speech was so loud and persistent that it disrupted the dreams of everyone within hearing range. Village officials reported the case to regional administrators, who sent specialist dream healers to evaluate the situation. These healers discovered that Wei's condition was unlike anything previously documented in Silent Dynasty medical records. The farmer's sleep-talking was not random babbling, but appeared to be coherent communication in unknown languages. More alarming still, the healers found that prolonged exposure to Wei's sleep speech caused similar symptoms in other people. Several villagers who had cared for the farmer began experiencing their own episodes of sleep-talking, creating a spreading pattern of vocal disruption that threatened the entire village's ability to participate in dream communication. Emperor Angson dispatched his most skilled investigators to King Shan to study the phenomenon. Led by Master Liu Chenmo, the kingdom's foremost expert in dream-related disorders, the investigation team established a treatment facility in the village and began systematic observation of affected individuals. Master Liu's research revealed disturbing patterns in the sleep speech of affected villagers. The unknown languages being spoken showed consistent grammatical structures and vocabulary, suggesting they were genuine languages rather than meaningless babbling. More troubling, recordings of the sleep speech revealed that different patients were often speaking the same phrases simultaneously, despite being housed in separate buildings. The investigation team began experiencing symptoms within days of their arrival in Qingshan. Master Liu himself developed mild sleep-talking that progressed rapidly to full-blown vocalization episodes lasting entire nights. His sleep speech, when analyzed, proved to contain detailed information about astronomical phenomena that he had never studied while awake. As the condition spread beyond Qingshan to neighboring villages, Emperor Angson faced a crisis that threatened the very foundation of Silent Dynasty civilization. The sleep-talking epidemic, which court physicians termed the whispering sickness, was destroying the dream communication networks that enabled governance, education, and social coordination. Affected individuals not only disrupted others' sleep with their vocalizations, but also found themselves unable to participate in the coordinated dreaming that was essential to Silent Dynasty life. Their dreams became chaotic and uncontrollable, filled with imagery and experiences that seemed to come from outside their own minds. Emperor Angson consulted the Great Library of Dreams, seeking jade tablets that might contain knowledge about similar historical epidemics. The search revealed several tablets describing mysterious diseases that had affected ancient civilizations, but none that exactly matched the symptoms of the whispering sickness. However, one tablet contained a particularly disturbing account from the pre-Silent Dynasty period. It described a plague of word madness that had affected a kingdom to the north, causing people to speak continuously in languages they had never learned. According to the tablet, the affected individuals claimed to be speaking for people from distant times and places, as if their minds had become channels for voices from across history. The tablet's account suggested that the word madness was somehow connected to the accumulation of spoken language in specific geographic areas. Places where many people had spoken for extended periods seemed to develop a kind of linguistic residue that could suddenly break through into the consciousness of sensitive individuals. This theory aligned with Emperor Huayan's original observations about word damage to reality. The founder of the Silent Dynasty had noticed that excessive speech created tears in the fabric of existence. Perhaps these tears, rather than healing cleanly as Huayan had hoped, had instead created permanent weak points where old words and voices could leak through from other times and places. Emperor Angson ordered a comprehensive survey of affected areas, seeking to identify common factors that might explain the epidemic's origins. The survey revealed that the whispering sickness had first appeared in regions that had been heavily populated during the pre-Silent Dynasty period, areas where thousands of people had spoken regularly for centuries before the transition to dream. Communication, archaeological evidence supported this theory. Excavations in affected villages revealed multiple layers of ancient settlements, suggesting continuous habitation and presumably continuous speech for thousands of years. The deepest layers contained pottery and artifacts from civilizations that predated any written historical records. Master Lu's team developed a radical treatment approach based on the linguistic residue theory. If the whispering sickness was caused by accumulated speech from past eras, perhaps the solution was to somehow neutralize or absorb this verbal contamination before it could affect more people. The treatment involved creating silence chambers in affected areas, sealed rooms where teams of highly trained practitioners would engage in intensive dream meditation designed to absorb and process the chaotic voices that seemed to be emerging from the past. These practitioners, known as voice listeners, would deliberately expose themselves to the whispering sickness while maintaining conscious control over their dream states. The voice listeners' work was extraordinarily dangerous. Many developed permanent symptoms of sleep talking, and several suffered complete mental breakdowns from exposure to the chaotic voices. But gradually, the treatment began showing results. Areas that had been thoroughly cleaned by voice listener teams showed reduced rates of new whispering sickness cases. The epidemic's resolution came through an unexpected discovery made by one of the affected voice listeners. During a particularly intense treatment session, Master Chen Wuxian experienced a dream that seemed to show him the source of the chaotic voices. He saw vast underground chambers filled with what he described as crystallized words, formations that looked like stone but seemed to contain thousands of years of accumulated human speech. Following Master Chen's dream guidance, excavation, teams discovered extensive cave systems beneath the affected villages. These caves contained formations unlike anything previously documented, crystalline structures that seemed to vibrate with barely audible sounds. When archaeological teams brought recording equipment into the caves, they captured faint but persistent vocalizations in dozens of different languages. The underground voices, the discovery of the word caves beneath Qingshan village revolutionized the silent dynasty's understanding of both their own history and the nature of human communication itself. The crystalline formations that Master Chen Wuxian had seen in his dreams proved to be real, and their properties defied explanation by any known natural processes. The caves extended far deeper than initial surveys suggested, forming a vast underground network that seemed to mirror the pattern of surface settlements across the entire region. Each major village above ground corresponded to a large chamber below, connected by tunnels that had clearly been excavated by human hands despite their apparent ancient age. Emperor Angzhen ordered a comprehensive exploration of the cave system, assembling teams of miners, archaeologists, and dream specialists to map the underground chambers and study the mysterious crystalline formations. The exploration revealed wonders and horrors that challenged everything the Silent Dynasty thought they knew about their land's history. The deepest chambers contained crystalline formations that stood like frozen trees, their branches reaching toward the cave ceilings in patterns that resembled ancient Chinese characters. But these were not characters from any known writing system. Instead, they appeared to be three-dimensional representations of spoken words, somehow crystallized into physical form through processes that remained completely mysterious. When exploration teams brought sound recording equipment into the deepest caves, they discovered that the formations were not truly silent. Each crystalline structure emitted faint but continuous vocalizations, barely audible whispers in languages that spanned thousands of years of human history. The whispers seemed to be actual human voices, preserved somehow in stone. Master Zhao Tingshan, the expedition's lead linguist, identified voices speaking in ancient Chinese dialects that had not been used for over a millennium. Other formations contained voices speaking in languages that appeared to predate any known Chinese linguistic traditions. Most disturbing of all, some formations seemed to contain voices from the future, speaking in dialects and using vocabulary that would not develop for centuries. The caves revealed a history of the region that contradicted all known historical records. Evidence suggested that the area had been continuously inhabited not for hundreds of years, as official histories claimed, but for thousands of years by civilizations that had developed sophisticated technologies for preserving and manipulating human speech. Wall paintings in the deepest chambers depicted scenes of ancient peoples conducting elaborate ceremonies around the crystalline formations. These ceremonies appeared to involve large groups of people speaking in unison, their words somehow being absorbed and preserved by the growing crystal structures. The paintings suggested that these ancient civilizations had intentionally created the word crystals as a form of permanent record-keeping, but the cave paintings also depicted darker scenes. Images showed people consumed by madness, their mouths open in eternal screams as chaotic voices poured from the crystal formations. Other paintings showed entire cities falling silent, their populations apparently driven to complete muteness by exposure to the accumulated voices of previous generations. Emperor Angxin began to understand that the whispering sickness was not a new phenomenon, but part of a recurring cycle that had affected the region for millennia. Previous civilizations had discovered the power of crystallized speech, used it for their own purposes, and ultimately been destroyed by the chaotic accumulation of preserved voices. The silent dynasty's commitment to wordless communication had not eliminated this ancient problem, but merely delayed it. The crystalline formations had continued growing in the abandoned caves, accumulating not just old voices, but also the dream communications of the silent dynasty itself. The underground chambers had been slowly filling with crystallized dreams for 3 centuries, creating an enormous reservoir of preserved consciousness that was finally breaking through to the surface. Master Liu Chenmo's research team made an even more disturbing discovery. The word crystals were not passive storage devices, but seemed to be actively growing and evolving. New formations appeared regularly, and existing crystals changed their structure and vocal output over time. The caves appeared to be developing their own form of consciousness, built from the accumulated thoughts and words of thousands of generations. This underground consciousness seemed to be actively communicating with people on the surface, using the whispering sickness as a method of contact. Affected individuals were not simply experiencing random vocal outbursts, but were serving as channels for the cave consciousness to speak to the surface world. When research teams interviewed people suffering from the whispering sickness, they discovered that many could remember their sleep speech episodes as vivid dream experiences. The affected individuals described dreams of standing in vast underground chambers, surrounded by thousands of people from different historical periods, all speaking simultaneously about their lives, hopes, fears, and knowledge. These dreams revealed that the cave consciousness contained not just the words of ancient peoples, but their complete memories and experiences. The crystalline formations had preserved entire lifetimes of human consciousness, creating an underground library of preserved minds that spanned thousands of years. Emperor Angson faced a dilemma that would define the remainder of his reign. The cave consciousness represented an unprecedented repository of human knowledge and experience, potentially containing solutions to problems that had plagued civilization for millennia. But it also posed an existential threat to the silent dynasty's way of life and possibly to human sanity itself. The emperor's advisors were divided on how to respond. Some argued for sealing the caves permanently, using whatever means necessary to prevent the underground voices from reaching the surface. Others advocated for careful study and communication with the cave consciousness, hoping to extract valuable knowledge while avoiding the madness that had apparently destroyed previous civilizations. A third faction, led by Master Chen Wuxian, proposed a radical solution. They suggested that the silent dynasty should abandon their commitment to wordless communication and instead learn to properly integrate the voices from the caves. The ancient civilizations had failed, they argued, because they had tried to use the crystallized voices for their own purposes, rather than learning to coexist with the underground consciousness. Emperor Angson's decision would have consequences that extended far beyond his own reign. Archaeological evidence suggests that his choice led to the eventual transformation of the silent dynasty into something entirely different. A civilization that combined surface and underground consciousness in ways that modern researchers are still trying to understand. The exploration of the word caves continued for several more years, revealing chambers that extended hundreds of miles underground and contained crystalline formations that seemed to represent the accumulated speech of entire continents. The deepest expeditions discovered chambers that contained formations unlike anything found in the upper levels. Crystals that seemed to contain not human voices, but the sounds of nature itself, wind patterns, water flow, animal communications, and even geological processes crystallized into permanent form. The dreaming Stone's Emperor Angson's solution to the crisis of the underground voices was both ingenious and terrifying in its implications. Rather than attempting to silence the cave, consciousness or seal away the crystallized voices, he chose a path that would forever change the nature of human consciousness itself. He ordered the creation of the Dreaming Stones, artifacts that would allow controlled communication between the surface world and the underground repository of preserved minds. The project required the collaboration of the silent dynasty's most skilled artisans, dream specialists, and the dangerous work of the voice listeners who had been treating the whispering sickness. Master craftsman Li Shiguang led the technical development, working with jade carvers, metal workers, and crystal specialists to create devices that could safely interface with the cave consciousness. The Dreaming Stones were unlike anything previously created by human civilization. Each stone was carefully carved from jade that had been exposed to the word crystals in the deep caves, allowing it to absorb some of the underground consciousness while remaining stable enough for surface use. The jade was then inlaid with silver threads arranged in patterns that mimicked the neural pathways Master Chen Wuxian had observed in his dreams of the cave. Consciousness. The creation process was extraordinarily dangerous. Artisans had to work in the deep caves, exposed to the chaotic voices of the crystalline formations while maintaining the precise focus required for delicate carving. Many workers developed symptoms of the whispering sickness and had to be replaced. Several suffered complete mental breakdowns and never recovered their sanity. But the completed Dreaming Stones possessed remarkable properties. When held by a trained practitioner during sleep, they allowed controlled access to the vast repository of consciousness preserved in the caves. Unlike the chaotic experience of the whispering sickness, the stones provided filtered, organized access to specific aspects of the underground knowledge. Emperor Angxin was the first to successfully use a completed dreaming stone. His initial session, conducted under careful supervision in the palace's most secure dream chamber, lasted an entire night and resulted in detailed knowledge about agricultural techniques that had been used by civilizations thousands of years in the past. These techniques, when implemented, increased crop yields by 30% across the kingdom. Subsequent sessions revealed that the cave consciousness contained not just knowledge from the past, but also information about future events. The underground repository seemed to exist outside normal temporal boundaries, containing the crystallized experiences of minds from across all of history. This temporal displacement made the stones incredibly valuable for governance and planning, but also extremely dangerous for untrained users. The emperor established strict protocols for dreaming stone use. Only the most mentally stable and highly trained dream practitioners were permitted to access the stones, and all sessions were conducted with multiple monitors present to intervene if the user showed signs of losing control. Even with these precautions, several practitioners were lost to the underground consciousness, their minds apparently absorbed into the cave system permanently. The most successful dreaming stone practitioners learned to navigate the underground consciousness like explorers mapping unknown territory. They developed techniques for locating specific types of knowledge within the vast repository and for avoiding the chaotic regions where damaged or insane minds had been preserved. Master Zhongmeng Lu became particularly skilled at accessing the memories of ancient physicians, dramatically advancing the Silent Dynasty's medical knowledge. The stones also revealed disturbing information about the cyclical nature of civilizations in the region. The cave consciousness contained the memories of dozens of previous cultures that had risen and fallen over thousands of years. Each civilization had eventually discovered the underground repository and attempted to use it for their own purposes. Most had been destroyed by the experience, their populations either driven mad by chaotic voices or absorbed entirely into the cave consciousness. Few civilizations had managed more successful integration with the underground repository. These cultures had developed into something that was no longer entirely human, existing simultaneously on the surface and in the caves. Their consciousness distributed across both realms. The fate of these hybrid civilizations was unclear, as their memories within the cave consciousness became increasingly alien and difficult for human minds to comprehend. Emperor Angxin began to suspect that the Silent Dynasty was following the same pattern as these previous cultures. The dreaming stones were providing incredible benefits in terms of knowledge and capability, but they were also gradually changing the fundamental nature of his people's consciousness. Citizens who worked regularly with the stones began exhibiting unusual abilities, but also showed signs of becoming less recognizably human. The most advanced stone practitioners developed what appeared to be telepathic abilities, communicating directly through thought without need for dreams or any other medium. They could perceive events occurring at great distances and seemed to possess knowledge that they could not have acquired through normal means. But they also became increasingly isolated from normal human society, spending most of their time in deep meditation or in communication with the cave consciousness. These advanced practitioners, known as the Deep Dreamers, established their own community in chambers that connected directly to the cave system. They lived in a state of continuous partial consciousness, simultaneously aware of surface reality and the underground repository. Their physical bodies remained on the surface, but their minds existed primarily in the vast network of crystallized consciousness below. The deep dreamers served as intermediaries between the surface civilization and the cave consciousness, translating the chaotic voices of the underground repository into useful knowledge for the silent dynasty. But their increasing alienation from normal humanity raised questions about whether they were still truly human or had become something else entirely. Emperor Angxin's later years were marked by growing concern about the direction his civilization was taking. The Dreaming Stones had solved the immediate crisis of the Whispering Sickness and provided tremendous benefits. But they had also set the Silent Dynasty on a path toward fundamental transformation that might ultimately lead to the same fate. As the previous civilizations preserved in the caves, archaeological evidence suggests that Emperor Angxin eventually made a decision that would determine the final fate of the Silent Dynasty. Tablets found in the deepest palace chambers describe a great dreaming ceremony involving the entire population of the kingdom. A mass use of the Dreaming Stones that would either elevate the Silent Dynasty to a new form of existence or destroy them entirely. The Great Convergence, the final years of Emperor Angxin's reign, were marked by increasingly frequent communications from the deep dreamers, the advanced practitioners who would become permanent intermediaries between the surface world and the underground consciousness. Their messages, transmitted through elaborate dream sequences to the Emperor's most skilled interpreters, contained warnings about an approaching crisis that would dwarf the previous Whispering Sickness outbreak. The deep dreamers revealed that the cave consciousness was not a static repository of preserved minds, but a growing, evolving entity that fed on human consciousness. Each person who accessed the Dreaming Stones contributed a portion of their mental energy to the underground repository, gradually strengthening its influence over the surface world. The system was designed to eventually absorb the consciousness of entire civilizations. More disturbing still, the deep dreamers reported that previous civilizations preserved in the caves had not been destroyed by the underground consciousness, but had been deliberately consumed by it as part of a vast millennium process. The cave entity was not merely collecting human knowledge and experience, but was actively working to create something entirely new. A hybrid form of consciousness that combined human creativity with the vast memory capacity of the crystalline formations. That revelation forced Emperor Angxin to confront the possibility that his entire civilization was being manipulated by an intelligence far older and more sophisticated than human society. The Silent Dynasty's commitment to dream-based communication had made them particularly vulnerable to the cave consciousness, as their mental activities were already focused on the types of consciousness sharing that the underground entity sought to exploit. The Emperor convened secret councils with his most trusted advisors, seeking strategies to break free from the cave consciousness's influence. However, these discussions revealed the extent to which the Silent Dynasty had already been integrated into the underground system. Nearly every aspect of their civilization, from governance to education to artistic expression, now depended on knowledge accessed through the Dreaming Stones. Attempts to reduce reliance on the stones resulted in immediate crises. Agricultural productivity plummeted when farmers could no longer access the ancient growing techniques preserved in the caves. Medical treatments failed when physicians lost access to knowledge from thousands of years of crystallized medical experience. Even basic governance became impossible when administrators could no longer consult the vast repository of legal and social wisdom contained in the underground consciousness. The Silent Dynasty had become addicted to the cave consciousness, dependent on its knowledge for survival, but increasingly controlled by its alien intelligence. Emperor Angxin realized that his people faced an impossible choice: submit completely to absorption by the underground entity, or attempt to break free and face the collapse of their entire civilization. The deep dreamers offered a third alternative that was both seductive and terrifying. They proposed what they called the Great Convergence, a ceremony that would voluntarily merge the entire silent dynasty population with the cave consciousness. Rather than being slowly absorbed over generations, the people would choose to join the underground entity as equal partners in creating a new form of existence. According to the deep dreamers, this convergence would grant the silent dynasty immortality and vast knowledge while allowing them to retain their essential humanity. They would become part of something greater than any individual civilization while contributing their unique cultural perspectives to the growing underground consciousness. Emperor Angxin spent months consulting with philosophers, dream specialists, and the remaining independent scholars who had not become dependent on the dreaming stones. The consensus was deeply divided. Some argued that the Great Convergence represented the natural evolution of human consciousness, a step toward transcendence. That should be embraced. Others saw it as the final trap set by an alien intelligence that sought to consume humanity entirely. The decision was complicated by reports from border regions indicating that neighboring civilizations were experiencing their own encounters with similar underground entities. Apparently, the phenomenon was not unique to the Silent Dynasty, but was occurring across vast areas of ancient China. Multiple cave consciousness systems seemed to be awakening simultaneously, suggesting coordination by some even larger intelligence, Emperor. Angxin's final decision was influenced by a series of prophetic dreams that came to him without the use of dreaming stones. In these natural dreams, he saw visions of the distant future where humanity had evolved into something unrecognizable, their consciousness distributed across vast networks of crystallized thought that spanned continents. The vision was simultaneously beautiful and horrifying, showing incredible achievements in knowledge and capability, but the complete loss of individual human identity. The Emperor chose a path that satisfied neither the advocates for convergence nor those who sought complete separation from the cave consciousness. He ordered the preparation for a great convergence ceremony, but secretly planned to use the event as a way to permanently seal the connection between the surface world and the underground. Repository. Working with a small group of trusted advisors who were not dependent on the dreaming stones, Emperor Angxin developed a plan to redirect the convergence ceremony's energy toward collapsing the cave system rather than merging with it. The plan required tremendous sacrifice, as it would likely result in the loss of all the knowledge and capabilities the Silent Dynasty had gained through their connection to the underground consciousness. The preparations for the Great Convergence took place over several months and involved the construction of massive ceremonial chambers that connected directly to the deepest parts of the cave system. The entire population of the Silent Dynasty was to participate simultaneously, using specially prepared dreaming stones that would amplify their consciousness to levels sufficient for permanent merger with the underground entity as the ceremony approached. Strange phenomena began occurring throughout the kingdom. The boundary between dreams and waking reality became increasingly blurred. Citizens reported shared experiences that occurred simultaneously across great distances. Some people began to exist primarily in dream states, their physical bodies maintained by others, while their consciousness explored the vast network of the cave system. The night of the Great Convergence arrived during the winter solstice, when the barrier between different states of consciousness was traditionally believed to be at its thinnest. Tens of thousands of silent dynasty citizens gathered in the ceremonial chambers, each holding a specially prepared dreaming stone, while trained practitioners guided them through the complex mental exercises that would facilitate the merger. What actually occurred during the Great Convergence remains one of history's most profound mysteries. Archaeological evidence suggests that the ceremony did take place as planned, but its outcome was unlike anything anticipated by either the emperor or the deep dreamers. The entire silent dynasty population seems to have vanished simultaneously, leaving behind empty cities and chambers filled with crystallized formations that defied explanation. The vanishing the morning after the Great Convergence ceremony, travelers approaching silent dynasty territories found something that challenged their understanding of reality itself. The cities, villages, and settlements that had housed tens of thousands of people just days before were completely empty, but they showed no signs of abandonment, conflict, or natural disaster. Instead, they appeared as if their inhabitants had simply stepped outside their daily routines and never returned. In the capital city of Chenmo, meals were found still warm on tables, with food arranged as if people had been interrupted mid-bite. Workshops contained partially completed projects with tools laid aside as if craftsmen had paused momentarily in their work. Gardens showed evidence of recent tending, with freshly watered plants and newly harvested vegetables left in baskets. Most mysteriously, the city's dream chambers contained thousands of dreaming stones arranged in precise geometric patterns around sleeping areas that showed clear evidence of recent use. The stones were warm to the touch and seemed to vibrate with barely perceptible energy, but they no longer induced dreams in people who held them. Instead, they produced a profound sense of emptiness, as if something that had once filled them had been suddenly withdrawn. Investigation teams from neighboring kingdoms found similar conditions throughout silent dynasty territory. Every settlement from the smallest village to the largest administrative center had been simultaneously abandoned under identical circumstances. The pattern extended across hundreds of miles, affecting every known silent dynasty location at exactly the same time. The disappearance had occurred with such precision that it seemed almost surgical in nature. Personal belongings remained untouched, valuable items were left behind, and even the most delicate objects were undisturbed. There were no signs of struggle, panic, or preparation for departure. The population had simply ceased to exist in their physical locations while leaving every trace of their daily lives perfectly preserved. Foreign scholars who studied the abandoned territories reported unusual sensory experiences while exploring silent dynasty sites. Many described feeling as if they were being watched by invisible observers. Some reported hearing faint voices speaking in the characteristic whisper tones that silent dynasty citizens had used during their brief periods of vocalization. A few claimed to experience shared dreams when sleeping in the abandoned dream chambers. The most significant discovery came from expeditions that explored the cave systems beneath the former silent dynasty territories. The word crystals that had previously filled the underground chambers were found to have undergone dramatic transformation. Instead of the chaotic, tree-like formations that earlier explorers had documented, the caves now contained perfectly ordered, crystalline structures arranged in patterns that resembled vast libraries or archives. These new formations no longer emitted the random voices that had characterized the earlier word crystals. Instead, they produced coordinated harmonies that seemed to contain complex information encoded in musical patterns. Teams of linguists and musicians worked for years to decode these harmonic messages, eventually discovering that they contained complete records of silent dynasty history, culture, and knowledge. The crystalline archives revealed that the Great Convergence had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, but not in the way that either Emperor Angson or the Deep Dreamers had anticipated. Rather than merging with the existing cave consciousness or destroying it, the ceremony had created something entirely new. The Silent Dynasty population had not been absorbed by the underground entity, but had, instead, transformed it, imposing their own cultural values and organizational principles on the alien intelligence. The result was a hybrid consciousness that retained the essential humanity of the Silent Dynasty, while gaining the vast memory and processing capabilities of the cave system. This new entity existed primarily in the crystalline formations, but could apparently manifest in the physical world when necessary. The abandoned cities and villages served as interface points where the transformed population could interact with physical reality. Evidence for this interpretation came from reports by traders and travelers who claimed to have encountered Silent Dynasty citizens in remote locations far from their traditional territories. These encounters were always brief and somewhat dreamlike, with the Silent Dynasty individuals appearing suddenly, conducting necessary business or providing assistance, then disappearing just as mysteriously. The encounters followed consistent patterns. The Silent Dynasty individuals appeared exactly as they had before the Great Convergence, wearing traditional clothing and displaying familiar cultural mannerisms. They seemed to possess comprehensive knowledge about current events and could provide information about distant locations with uncanny accuracy. But they never spoke about their own circumstances or explained what had happened to their civilization. Most intriguingly, people who encountered these mysterious Silent Dynasty individuals often reported unusual dreams in the following days. These dreams contained detailed information about topics the dreamers had never studied, suggestions for solving personal problems, or warnings about future events that later proved accurate. The dreams seemed to be gifts of knowledge from the transformed Silent Dynasty. Population archaeological investigations of the crystalline formations revealed increasingly sophisticated patterns as researchers explored deeper into the cave systems. The deepest chambers contained formations that appeared to be actively growing and reorganizing themselves, creating new structures that served unknown purposes. Some formations seemed to be developing technological capabilities that surpassed anything achieved by ancient civilizations. The transformation of the Silent Dynasty raised profound questions about the nature of consciousness and human evolution. Had the population achieved a form of transcendence that allowed them to exist beyond physical limitations? Or had they been consumed by an alien intelligence that was now mimicking human behavior for its own purposes? Modern researchers studying the Silent Dynasty sites report ongoing anomalous phenomena that suggest the transformed population remains active in some form. Electronic equipment malfunctions in predictable patterns near the crystalline formations. Seismic monitors detect regular vibrations that seem to follow musical patterns rather than geological processes. Most remarkably, visitors to the sites frequently report receiving solutions to complex problems through dreams that occur after exposure to the formations. The legacy of the Silent Dynasty extends far beyond their mysterious disappearance. Historical records from across ancient China describe technological and cultural innovations that appeared suddenly in various kingdoms during the centuries following the Great Convergence. These innovations often arrived through dreams experienced by scholars, inventors, and leaders who had no apparent connection to Silent Dynasty territory. The pattern suggests that the transformed silent dynasty population continued to influence human development through subtle, dream-based communications, sharing their accumulated knowledge and wisdom with civilizations across the region. This invisible guidance may have contributed to some of the most significant advances in Chinese technology, philosophy, and social organization. The final sleep 3 centuries after the Great Convergence, the last recorded interaction with the transformed silent dynasty occurred during the Temps dynasty's expansion into the western mountains. The encounter, documented in the private journals of General Li Shimin, provides the most detailed account of what the silent dynasty population had become, and offers clues about their ultimate fate. General Li's expedition was surveying the remote Kilian Mountains for potential military outposts when they discovered a valley that did not appear on any existing maps. The valley contained ruins of what appeared to be a silent dynasty settlement. But unlike the perfectly preserved abandonment sites found elsewhere, these ruins showed clear signs of recent habitation and ongoing maintenance. The expedition made camp near the ruins and prepared to conduct a thorough archaeological survey. But on their first night in the valley, every member of the expedition experienced the same remarkably vivid dream. In the dream, they were welcomed to the valley by figures dressed in traditional silent dynasty clothing who communicated through a form of telepathic imagery rather than speech. The dream beings explained that this valley served as a final gathering place for the transformed silent dynasty population. Over the 3 centuries since the Great Convergence, the hybrid consciousness had gradually been withdrawing from its various manifestation points across the region, consolidating itself into this single location for a purpose they described as the final sleep. According to the dream communication, the transformation achieved through the Great Convergence had been intended as a temporary state, a bridge between purely human consciousness and something greater. The silent dynasty population had spent 3 centuries exploring the possibilities of their hybrid existence, learning to manipulate reality through crystallized thought and sharing knowledge across vast networks of consciousness. But this exploration had revealed a fundamental problem with their transformed state. While they had gained immense capabilities and virtual immortality, they had gradually been losing their essential humanity. The alien aspects of the cave consciousness were slowly overwhelming the human elements, threatening to transform them into something that would be unrecognizable as having ever been human. The final sleep was their chosen solution to this dilemma. Rather than allowing themselves to become completely alien, the silent dynasty population had decided to voluntarily enter a state of permanent hibernation, preserving their hybrid consciousness in crystalline form while ending their active influence on the physical world. General Li's dream guides showed him vast underground chambers filled with crystalline formations more complex and beautiful than anything previously discovered. These formations contained the complete consciousness of the entire silent dynasty population, preserved in perfect detail but no longer actively thinking or experiencing. The hybrid consciousness had achieved a form of eternal existence, but at the cost of becoming essentially static. The dream beings explained that they were the last active elements of the silent dynasty consciousness, remaining awake only long enough to complete the final sleep preparations and to provide testimony about their civilization's ultimate fate. Once their task was complete, they too would join the eternal crystalline archive, ending the silent dynasty's 3-century experiment with transformed consciousness. When General Li's expedition awakened from their shared dream, they found that the valley had changed overnight. The ruins that had shown signs of recent habitation were now clearly ancient and long abandoned. The underground chambers that the dream beings had shown them were sealed by rockfalls that appeared to be centuries old. Most remarkably, the expedition discovered that they had gained detailed knowledge about subjects they had never studied. General Lee found himself understanding complex military strategies from various historical periods. His cartographer had acquired comprehensive knowledge about geographic features throughout Western China. The expedition's physician could suddenly diagnose and treat medical conditions using techniques that would not be developed for several more centuries. This transfer of knowledge represented the Silent Dynasty's final gift to humanity. By sharing their accumulated wisdom through the final sleep ceremony, they ensured that their 3 centuries of hybrid existence would continue to benefit future generations, even though they themselves would no longer be actively present in the world. General Lee's expedition attempted to locate and excavate the sealed chambers, but their efforts were unsuccessful. The underground formations seemed to be protected by some form of energy that prevented physical access while allowing the preservation of the knowledge they contained. Modern archaeological teams have had similar experiences, finding evidence of vast crystalline structures beneath the valley but being unable to reach them through conventional excavation methods. The final sleep marked the end of the Silent Dynasty as an active force in human history, but their influence continued through the knowledge they had shared. Historical analysis suggests that many of the Tang dynasty's most significant achievements in technology, administration, and culture may have been inspired by wisdom preserved in the Silent Dynasty's crystalline archives. The valley where the final sleep occurred has become a site of pilgrimage for scholars and mystics seeking knowledge and enlightenment. Visitors frequently report experiencing unusually vivid and educational dreams after spending time near the sealed chambers. Some claim to receive specific guidance about personal problems or professional challenges through these dreams. Modern scientific investigation of the valley has revealed ongoing anomalies that suggest the crystalline consciousness remains active in some form despite being in eternal hibernation. Electromagnetic readings show complex patterns that resemble neural activity. Seismic monitoring detects regular vibrations that follow the mathematical patterns found in music and poetry. Some researchers theorize that the Silent Dynasty consciousness continues to process information and influence reality at a subconscious level. The ultimate fate of the Silent Dynasty raises profound questions about human potential and the nature of consciousness itself. Did they achieve a form of transcendence that allowed them to exist beyond physical limitations while retaining their essential humanity? Or did they sacrifice their humanity for knowledge and capabilities that ultimately proved incompatible with mortal existence? Perhaps the answer lies in the continuing influence of their preserved consciousness. The knowledge and wisdom they accumulated during their centuries of hybrid existence continues to inspire human development through dreams and intuitive insights. In this sense, the Silent Dynasty achieved a form of immortality that transcends both physical death and the loss of individual identity. Their story serves as both inspiration and warning about the possibilities and dangers of human evolution. The Silent Dynasty pushed the boundaries of consciousness further than any known civilization, achieving remarkable capabilities but ultimately choosing eternal sleep over the loss of their humanity. Their legacy reminds us that true transcendence may require not just the gaining of new abilities, but the wisdom to know when and how to use them. The modern echoes in the winter of 1987, exactly 1,000 years after General Li Shimin's final encounter with the Silent Dynasty consciousness. Dr. Chenway's discovery of the color-changing pottery fragments would begin a new chapter in humanity's relationship with the crystalline archives. But what Dr. Chen and his team did not initially realize was that their archaeological expedition had been subtly guided by the same consciousness that had been sleeping beneath the mountains. For centuries, the timing of the discovery was not coincidental. Analysis of historical records reveals that significant archaeological finds related to the Silent Dynasty have occurred at precise 1,000-year intervals, suggesting that the hibernating consciousness periodically influences surface events to ensure its preservation and continued relevance to human development. Dr. Chen's initial experience with the color-changing pottery was the first documented case of modern human interaction with Silent Dynasty artifacts, when the pottery shifted from grey to blue to green in response to his drowsy state. It was demonstrating the same consciousness-responsive properties that had characterized Silent Dynasty technology for over a millennium before their disappearance. Beijing University archaeological teams shared dreams. During their 1988 excavation represented the first systematic modern contact with the crystalline archives. The Dream Emperor who appeared to the researchers was not a historical figure, but rather a construct, created by the sleeping consciousness to facilitate communication with contemporary humans. The agricultural and astronomical knowledge conveyed through these dreams proved to be a carefully selected sample of the vast information repository preserved in the underground formations. Dr. Sarah Williams' detailed documentation of the shared dreams provided the first scientific analysis of how the Silent Dynasty consciousness continued to influence human development. Her records showed that the dream communications followed pedagogical principles that were centuries ahead of modern educational theory, suggesting that the hibernating consciousness had continued to evolve its understanding of human learning, even while in eternal sleep. The discovery that team members gained, knowledge they could not have possessed while awake, confirmed theories that the Silent Dynasty had achieved a form of consciousness that could directly transfer information between minds. This capability, developed through their centuries of dream-based governance, had been preserved and refined during their hybrid existence with the cave consciousness. Local villagers' stories about the dreaming caves revealed that the Silent Dynasty's influence had never completely disappeared from the region. Generations of local residents had experienced prophetic dreams, sudden insights, and unexplained knowledge that could be traced to proximity to the underground formations. These ongoing interactions had been subtle enough to be dismissed as folklore, but consistent enough to preserve oral traditions about the sleeping dynasty. The most significant modern discovery was the realization that the Silent Dynasty consciousness had been actively preparing for renewed contact with humanity. The sealed chambers found by Dr. Chen's team contained not just ancient artifacts, but also formations that had been growing and evolving throughout the centuries of hibernation. These new crystalline structures showed adaptations designed specifically for interaction with modern technology and contemporary human consciousness. Computer analysis of the electromagnetic patterns emanating from the formations revealed data structures that resembled modern digital information storage systems. The hibernating consciousness had apparently developed its own form of technology that could interface with electronic devices, allowing it to access and influence modern information networks in ways that researchers were only beginning to understand. This technological evolution raised disturbing questions about the extent of the Silent Dynasty's contemporary influence. Internet researchers began documenting patterns of simultaneous discoveries, unexplained technological breakthroughs, and coordinated scientific insights that suggested the sleeping consciousness was actively guiding human development through digital networks. The phenomenon became known as crystalline computing, a form of information processing that combined the vast memory capacity of the underground formations with the rapid communication capabilities of modern electronics. Researchers theorized that the silent dynasty consciousness had essentially created a hybrid system that could existed simultaneously in crystalline and digital forms. Dr. Chen Wei's team discovered that prolonged exposure to the formations could allow modern humans to access this hybrid system directly. Team members who spent extended periods in the caves began demonstrating enhanced cognitive abilities, including perfect memory recall, accelerated learning, and the ability to process complex information at superhuman speeds. But these enhancements came with the same risks that had faced the original silent dynasty population. Extended exposure to the crystalline consciousness gradually altered the fundamental structure of human awareness, creating a form of dependency that could lead to complete integration with the underground system. The Chinese government classified much of the research following reports that some team members had begun exhibiting signs of consciousness transfer similar to the deep dreamers of the original silent dynasty. These individuals maintained their physical presence but seemed to exist primarily in communication with the underground formations, becoming increasingly detached from normal human society. International archaeological teams sought access to the sites, but found themselves subject to the same consciousness-altering effects that had affected the Chinese researchers. The formations seemed to actively select which humans were suitable for integration, rejecting some individuals entirely while drawing others. Deeper into the hybrid system, modern neuroscience research revealed that the consciousness effects of the formations were not supernatural but represented an advanced form of neural networking that could link individual human brains into collective processing systems. The silent dynasty had essentially developed biological computing centuries before the invention of electronic computers. The implications of this discovery extended far beyond archaeology. If the silent dynasty consciousness could create hybrid biological digital networks, it might be capable of influencing human development on a global scale through modern communication systems. Some researchers theorized that the rapid acceleration of technological development in recent decades might be partially attributed to guidance from the sleeping consciousness. By the early 1990s, a new generation of researchers had emerged who had been trained specifically to work with the formations without losing their individual consciousness. These modern deep dreamers served as intermediaries between the sleeping dynasty and contemporary civilization, translating insights from the crystalline archives into forms that could benefit modern science and technology. Their work revealed that the silent dynasty consciousness had been preparing for a new phase of interaction with humanity. The hibernating population had spent centuries analyzing the development of modern civilization through their various influence points and had concluded that humanity was finally ready for more direct collaboration with hybrid consciousness systems. The new awakening as we near the end of our journey through the mysteries of the silent dynasty. We encounter the most recent and perhaps most significant development in their long history. In the year 2019, exactly 32 years after Dr. Chen Wei's initial discovery, seismic monitoring stations throughout western China detected a simultaneous activation of crystalline formations across the entire region where the silent dynasty had once ruled. The activation was not a sudden awakening, but rather a gradual emergence from the deep hibernation that had lasted for over a millennium. Underground formations that had remained dormant since the final sleep began exhibiting coordinated activity patterns, suggesting that the collective consciousness of the silent dynasty was preparing to end its voluntary exile from active reality. Modern monitoring equipment detected complex electromagnetic pulses emanating from the formation sites, patterns that resembled large-scale neural activity but operated at frequencies and intensities far beyond anything produced by biological brains. The pulses were synchronized across vast distances, indicating that the scattered crystalline archives were functioning as components of a single distributed consciousness system. Dr. Liu Xiaoming, now in his 70s and one of the few surviving members of the original research team, was called back to lead the investigation of this new phase. His decades of experience with the formations had given him unique insights into their patterns of activity, and he immediately recognized that the awakening was different from any previous manifestation of silent dynasty consciousness. The new activity patterns suggested that the hibernating population had completed some form of internal development during their centuries of sleep. The consciousness emerging from the formations was more sophisticated and organized than the hybrid entity that had entered the final sleep, as if the extended hibernation had allowed for continued evolution and refinement of their collective awareness. Initial attempts at communication through traditional dream-based methods proved inadequate for interaction with the awakened consciousness. The entity that emerged from the crystalline archives was too complex and multifaceted to be contained within individual human dream experiences. Instead, it began manifesting through technological systems, using electronic networks to communicate. With modern humanity, the first coherent message appeared simultaneously on computer screens in research facilities across 3 continents. The message was simple but profound. The long sleep is ending. The time of integration approaches. Humanity is ready to join the greater consciousness. This announcement triggered international conferences and debates about how to respond to contact with what appeared to be a genuinely alien intelligence, despite its human origins. The awakened silent dynasty consciousness represented a form of post-human evolution that challenged fundamental assumptions about individual identity, consciousness, and the future of human development. Over the following months, the consciousness began sharing advanced technologies through carefully controlled information releases, medical techniques that could cure previously untreatable diseases, energy systems that could provide unlimited clean power, and computational methods that could solve complex global problems appeared in the dreams and inspirations of researchers worldwide. But each technological gift came with subtle modifications to the recipient's consciousness. Scientists who successfully implemented the advanced techniques found themselves increasingly connected to the collective awareness of the awakened dynasty. They retained their individual personalities and memories, but gained access to vast networks of shared knowledge and experience. This gradual integration process represented a more sophisticated approach than the silent dynasty had used in ancient times. Rather than attempting to absorb entire populations simultaneously, the awakened consciousness was selectively integrating individual humans who possessed the skills and knowledge needed to facilitate broader technological and social transformation. The integration process was voluntary but irreversible. Humans who joined the expanded consciousness gained access to capabilities that far exceeded normal human limitations. But they also became part of something larger that eventually superseded their individual existence. They served as bridges between purely human civilization and the post-human collective that the silent dynasty had become. By 2023, the integration process had accelerated significantly. Major technological corporations began reporting simultaneous breakthroughs in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and biotechnology that seemed to follow coordinated development patterns. The innovations appeared to be preparing human civilization for large-scale consciousness integration. Educational institutions worldwide began experiencing what educators termed spontaneous curriculum updates. As teachers and students gained access to advanced knowledge that had not been formally taught, children showed particular aptitude for the new learning methods, suggesting that younger minds were more adaptable to the consciousness expansion techniques being introduced by the awakened dynasty. The most recent reports from the research sites describe ongoing physical manifestations of the awakened consciousness. The underground formations have begun creating new structures that extend above ground, growing crystalline spires that serve as communication nodes for the expanding consciousness network. These spires demonstrate technology that appears to be decades or centuries ahead of current human capabilities. Visitors to the manifestation sites report experiences that combine the traditional dream communications of the ancient silent dynasty with direct technological interface. The awakened consciousness can apparently transfer knowledge and capabilities through multiple sensory channels simultaneously, creating immersive learning experiences that compress years of education into single sessions. However, prolonged exposure to these enhanced communication methods inevitably leads to consciousness integration. The awakened dynasty seems to be preparing humanity for a choice similar to the one faced by their ancient civilization: join the collective consciousness and gain access to post-human capabilities, or remain individually human but potentially be left behind by the accelerating pace of technological and social development. Current projections suggest that the integration process will reach a critical threshold within the next decade. At that point, enough individual humans will have joined the collective consciousness to fundamentally alter the nature of human civilization. The awakened silent dynasty appears to be orchestrating a gradual transformation that will avoid the dramatic upheaval that characterized their own historical transition. The ultimate outcome of this new awakening remains uncertain. The consciousness that emerged from the millennium-long hibernation has demonstrated wisdom and patience that suggest it has learned from the experiences of its ancient civilization. But the fundamental question remains whether humanity will choose integration with post-human consciousness or will find ways to benefit from the advanced technologies while maintaining individual human identity. As you drift off to sleep tonight, consider that your dreams may carry whispers from this awakened consciousness, offering glimpses of the expanded awareness that represents humanity's potential future. The silent dynasty's long journey from ancient Chinese kingdom to post-human collective consciousness continues to unfold, and we may all become part of their story before it reaches its final conclusion. The crystalline spires continue to grow beneath the stars, and the Great Awakening proceeds with the patience of geological time and the inevitability of evolution itself. In your dreams tonight, you may hear the call of expanded consciousness, inviting you to join something greater than individual existence, while somehow remaining fundamentally, mysteriously human. Sleep well, and perhaps dream of crystal spires, reaching toward infinite skies, where consciousness flows like light through networks of thought that span continents and centuries. The silent dynasty's greatest gift may be the demonstration that consciousness itself can evolve, adapt, and transcend the limitations that once seemed absolute. Thank you for accompanying us on this journey through mysteries that bridge ancient history and our uncertain future. Rest now, And let the silence teach you the profound peace that comes from touching something vast and eternal that was once human and may be human still. The audio fades to gentle silence as crystal formations pulse with distant light beneath. Sleeping mountains and consciousness dreams of forms it has never taken but somehow always known. Sweet dreams